Welcome to our first television broadcast of Scary Stories with Kalila. I'm being joined tonight with Alan Gilbreth and Tanya Vandensteeg. Tanya, welcome. We haven't seen you in forever. Tanya and I go way back. We've done a lot of investigations together and a lot of panel talks at different cons over the years, and we've shared a lot of paranormal experiences. Welcome, welcome. Thank you for joining us tonight.
Super excited, Kalila. Thank you.
Well, we're going to delve into one of the scariest things. This is Scary Stories with Kalila, and we examine what frightens you. And I think one of the things that's frightening to a lot of people is haunted dolls. It's a big common theme right now. A lot of people claim they have haunted dolls. A lot of people travel all over the place to visit haunted dolls. It's a big, big business. And some of these dolls have actually caused quite a bit of trouble. So, first off, let's talk about why are people scared of dolls? Tanya, you don't like dolls. I remember you not liking the dolls for some reason. They do creep you out, right?
Correct, Kalila. I'm not a doll person. I don't own any, and I don't know what it is, honestly. And I would love to kind of explore that kind of. It's not a fear. I wouldn't say it's a phobia of any kind. Of just being in the paranormal industry for as long as I can remember. Dolls were always something that I'm just like, I kind of scared, clear of that. But I don't know. I think the kind of the thought of a potential spirit of a child being, or if we can go even more menacing, of something inside a doll and making it move and its eyes move. It's just creepy. I mean, it hasn't helped that movies have made it worse. It's just creepy.
Well, yeah, of course. And the movies have focused in a couple of the most famous dolls that we have here in the U.S., of course, the big one being Annabelle. Annabelle's had several movies made over about her. And in actuality, Annabelle was a huge, big Raggedy Ann doll. And as the story goes, this young nurse got Annabelle as a gift. And once she brought Annabelle to her apartment, things started happening to her and her roommate. And then later the roommate's boyfriend would come over, and supposedly Annabelle even attacked this particular gentleman. Now, this is a very, very famous case because they brought in the famous paranormal investigations of the 1970s, the Warrens.
Right.
And they came in, and a lot of investigation was done on the history. Supposedly a little girl had died that had lived in that apartment many, many years before. And the doll was supposedly presenting itself as this little girl. Now, because you said you think about children, a lot of people would say, well, there's a child's soul in there. See, that's the danger of these things, is that, and they are dangerous because you may very well have something attached to the doll, but there's no soul living in the doll. Basically, what it is, there's going to be a discarnate spirit that is on our earth plane, and usually those are kind of menacing spirits. Not necessarily a demon, but they are kind of, they can be anything from chaotic to actual evil. And they become attached to people, places, or things, very commonly things. And what happens is they'll convince you that they are an innocent child, when in fact, they could be very, very evil or even demonic. And what they're looking for is a human host to attach to instead of the doll. And that's where they start reeling people in. And of course, the owners of Annabelle had brought the Warrens in to do an investigation after this gentleman got attacked by Annabelle, allegedly. And they told her about this. They are like, no. This is not a little kid in there. This is a spirit wanting to attach to you. They want to possess you. So they're like, get that thing out of there. And supposedly the Warrens even had an accident on the way home with Annabelle and a lot of problems. And they wound up putting her in a glass case.
Right.
And she's there today. She's there today in the Haunted Museum that's owned by John Zaffis. John Zaffis is the nephew of Mr. Warren. So, it's a pretty famous case. The other one that's really, really noted is the one in Key West, Robert the Doll. And a lot of people are familiar with Robert the doll. Robert, now this is where the whole voodoo edge comes in. You know, remember the movie Candyman and the Chucky
Yes.
movie and all, with the voodoo being involved. Robert the doll, this child by the name of Robert Eugene, they called him Gene, he was given a doll by a caretaker. There was a caretaker who came into the home and was, you know, kind of a sitter or nanny, if you will, of the child. And for one of his birthdays, now you got to realize back then in the 1950s and the 1940s and all, it was very, very common. Even myself growing up in the 60s, I had a doll that was probably the same size as me as a 4-year-old, and the doll looked like me.
That's creepy.
Well, you know, but they don't look like me. I mean, I've always had hair like this. I've always had the straight hair with the bangs, dark straight hair with the bangs. And the doll had hair like me. The doll looked like me. So it was kind of a me doll. And that was very, very common back then. That was a fad. That was a thing. They would give a child a doll that looked like them. Well, it just so happened that Robert was handmade by this woman. She meticulously handmade him, sewed him, gave him button eyes, and now, allegedly, the lady was from somewhere in the Caribbean, and there's some talk of voodoo being involved with this, that she may have infused some sort of spirit into this doll to attach itself to Gene, not to be menacing to him, not to harm him, but to keep herself connected to him. Now, that's one of the legends that goes around. Now, as it turned out, this child, for his entire childhood, things would happen. He would break something. He would do something. Now, this is a typical little boy thing. I mean, you know, his parents would say, "Did you do this?" And they would say, "No, Robert did it." Because the doll, we called the doll Robert by his first name. And he would say, "No, Robert did it." And he would blame things on the doll, and his parents would be like, "No, that doesn't make any sense." Well, long story short, he wound up keeping Robert his entire life. Even after he got married, even after he lived in the family home. And his wife felt very disturbed about the whole Robert thing. And she's like, no, I'm not having this. She put Robert up in the attic. Well, then people in the area, because Key West, I don't know if you've been to Key West, but it's a very small little island. It's only like 4 miles all the way around it. And people started coming by the house and looking because they claimed that the curtains would open up and the doll would be peeking out and looking at people. And then he'd close it. Now, the doll would also move around the place. It's also said that when Eugene was a young boy, that a lot of people would notice that the doll's facial expressions would change. So it's a very, very famous story, very creepy doll. I haven't been to Annabelle's, but I have been to Key West, and I have been to the museum where Robert is housed today. And again, just like Annabelle, he is in a glass case. You cannot touch him. There's also, it's all roped off. You can't even go and tap on the glass. And it's interesting because the whole room, it's a very small room, and all the walls are covered with postcards from people who over the years interacted with Robert. And some people who insulted him or didn't believe in him, or they said, "Oh, this is stupid," they wrote back and said, "Well, this happened to me. I was almost killed in a motorcycle accident. I almost drove off of a cliff." I mean, all of a sudden, these horrendous things start happening to these people who taunt these dolls. Now, I interviewed a guy a while back when I was doing the podcast for Scariest Paranormal. And I interviewed a gentleman whom I will not mention because I can't say the name of the doll. Now, he owns a doll, and this doll is supposedly housing the devil himself.
What?
That's what they say. That's what they say. So now I have to say, I've tried to get him back on the show a couple more times. And every time I do, he starts warning me about all these things that could happen. And the last time I communicated with him was about a book I'm writing, because actually writing a book with Billy Roberts about the various realms of the other side, but not the other side where the good spirits go, where grandma dies and she crosses over and goes into the light. The other side, the spirits that remain earthbound, who do not cross over and for whatever reason stay here. We're writing a book about this, and I wanted to talk to this gentleman about the doll, and he starts warning me, and I want you to know that my computer crashed. I had all this computer crashing going on. I had things just all of a sudden things breaking all over the house. And I said, you know what? Maybe I don't want to do this.
Mm-mm.
And many years ago, he had contacted me. Originally, he contacted me many, many years ago and asked me if he brought the doll to New Orleans, would I do a video on the doll? And after he told me how he's caused people to, hurt their backs, hurt their legs, he's actually almost killed people. And I was like, why would I want to video this doll? Why would I want to do this? And I turned him down. And right after I got off of the phone with him, I walked outside to feed my dogs, and I tripped and really injured a muscle in my leg. And I was getting up early the next morning to take a cruise, and I couldn't walk the whole cruise. So, maybe it's true, maybe it's not. But you know what? When somebody tells me there's something demonic about this doll, I don't go there. Now, you have actually done investigations on dolls. So, you remember the ones that we in Memphis. I know you've done a few, but I know specifically in Memphis, we talked about the dolls were there. I remember the dolls being on the table, and this gentleman had brought these dolls. It seemed like there was a bunch of them, and they were in suitcases. And you and your team were doing the investigation. And I remember somebody saying, "Hey, Kalila, you got to come with us on the investigation." I was like, "No, I don't think so. You guys go do that. We'll discuss it later, but I don't want to be around when you're finding out whatever's on that doll." So, can you tell us a little bit about some of your findings when you were doing some of these investigations on these alleged haunted dolls?
Alan, stop it. Well, number one, you wouldn't come with us. Number two, we didn't invite Alan. So,
well,
obviously,
you don't bring in the skeptic when you're doing this. It's you bring him in later.
Look,
we have him now. See, yeah.
I have to really quickly say that for anybody that's out there watching and is just finding out kind of who we are, or may know Alan or you, Kalila, or just me, and don't know, like us three, this is a weird kind of combination. And way overdue. Can't wait to hug both your necks. But Alan Gilbert, I'm at a convention. First time I'm ever showing up with this paranormal group that I'm in. Don't know Alan. Have heard stories about a voodoo priestess terrifying me. And I mean, look, you can't be scared of Kalila now. Why would I? But it is so funny because I sat down and Alan's like, "Hey, I'm Alan Gilbreth." And like, yeah, Kalila's going to be on this panel and I'm on this panel. And I'm like, I have a voodoo priestess and I don't know who this guy is, Alan, but he keeps saying that he's a skeptic. And then Kalila comes up and here she is. She's so famous. Here's a voodoo priestess. And I just grabbed Alan. I said, "You sit here next to me." Because I had this weird stigma back. I mean, how many years ago was this? Like this
had a lot. We go back. We go back over 10 years. I mean, it's been a while. I mean, we've done some things. I remember the time there were bats you come running up in batches, and she's like, "There's bats in this hole in the ground. There's a big hole in the ground, and there's bats in there. You got to see this." And I went,
"Nope.
You take the camera, hold the camera down in the hole in the ground, and you get some filming of it. Just don't drop the camera, but I'm not going over there." Now, I do want to say I have a disclaimer. My disclaimer is, folks, that it wasn't the bats in the hole in the ground that I was afraid of. It was the fact that it was Mississippi in the summertime, and I was told there were ticks and rattlesnakes everywhere. That's why I didn't go. But anyway, nonetheless, Tanya the Fearless goes over, and she's like, I don't know if Alan had her by her ankles or what was going on over there.
Probably.
But they're dropping Tanya and the camera down into this old well so she can get the bats flying around. And I'm like, I'll just sit here.
It's all for the footage. We do it all for the footage.
Yeah, of course. You got to do it. You got to get the footage. You got to get the picture. So tell us though about what happened when you actually, now the story about the dolls that this gentleman had, and he has over 100 of them. He's got a lot of dolls.
Yeah.
This isn't just one doll that this guy's got. He's got like a collection. He's got a huge collection. And I remember him saying that the dolls were not evil, that they were very nice, but he came up with these pathetic stories of these pitiful children who died and the poor child. I just want to clarify, folks, as a medium, as somebody who is, I consider myself an occultist. I have studied, every aspect of the occult, metaphysics. I'm a medium. I'm here to tell you, little children don't die and get stuck in dolls' bodies. It doesn't happen. Okay, it doesn't happen. Just like, with these other dolls, with Annabelle, this was not a little girl stuck inside the doll. But what happens is there is a realm of spirits who do not cross over. And my co-host on the other show is Billy Roberts, of course, from England. And I love the fact that he calls them vagabonds of the spirit world. And these are earthbound entities that are here, that attach to people, attach to things. And if you want to believe that that's the child, it'll roll with it. It'll let you think it is what it is. You want it to be a child? Okay, I'm a child. Here you go. Let's go with this. But what you're dealing with is this discarnate spirit whose primary goal is to attach to a human host. And that's the frightening part about this stuff. So let's hear when you got in there, and because I know that gentleman that owns the dolls, I could see the look on his face. It was very disappointing for me to come all the way from New Orleans to sit on the panel and go, nope, that's not what it is. Here's what it is. And I just saw all the blood leave his face. And I'm like, when this panel's over, I got to hightail it out of here because this guy and his dolls are going to come get me for what I just said.
When is Kalila ever been afraid?
In matches with rattlesnakes and ticks. But anyway.
Well, when have you ever been afraid of like a confrontation when it comes to paranormal? And I'll give a disclaimer here about Kalila's like, bring it. When you believe in it, you know what you're talking about. I'm going to put a disclaimer out there about the gentleman that owns the dolls. This one of the sweetest men I've ever known. And
there was no debating that the man was sweet. Very nice, right. But I think he's very deceived by whatever spirits. And I don't doubt that he has haunted dolls. I'm just thinking that he's very deceived by what is attached to those dolls.
Right.
And on top they're not what they're presenting themselves to be.
Right. And that's what I was going to add on to this disclaimer is that I full out know where you're coming. Like you are coming from that side of the mediumship and knowing, and he's coming from the side of what he's seeing. And it's a really neat combination to see you guys come together. Because I think that audiences want that. They want that like skeptic versus believer kind of interaction. So it worked really well. Like and coming from my perspective, I think the dolls are creepy. More respect to the maker of the dolls, but the spirits behind them, I've always didn't set well with me. So maybe that's where I get kind of like the unease about it. But yes, what we did was we at one of the conventions we were at, after all the panels were over and everybody was doing their thing, we got a big room in the convention and we brought people that wanted to seriously be involved in an investigation, and we full out did a paranormal investigation, ghost hunter style kind of thing. All the equipment that we would use of K2 meters and electric voice recorders and all of that. We set the dolls up on the table and we just full out, we're involved in an investigation. We've done this several times. Yes, these dolls are brought to conventions and set out in the public, and there are stories behind them, as you said. So we kind of went along with those stories of the sense of, are you this spirit in this doll? And we had several encounters happen where, little slight movements of an arm or a leg or an eye like shift from this direction to this direction, which, about sends me out of the room. But being, like you said, I'm fearless, I've got to do my job. This is a controversial topic too. We did get some EVPs that I don't have in my possession. Hopefully maybe we can get them and Alan will attach them later. Yeah, I'll see if I can get a hold of those. They weren't in my possession because they weren't on my recording device. But it's the orb kind of situation, a spirit orb. And we've been in this business long enough to know that there's dust and there's bugs and there's yada, and we're not going to debunk that on this show. But I will say that the photos that I reviewed from this investigation were from all over the room. I just went and started clicking photos. And in almost every photo that I have, there is a bright orb around his dolls or above his head. And to be honest with you, even more specific, that it's a bigger orb above his head and smaller ones around the dolls.
It's not surprising though. Yeah.
I full out believe that there is something up with these dolls. I full out believe that there's something going on, he would tell me stories about how, like, don't get too close because she may come to your room tonight and mess with you. Or if you feel a tickling on the feet, it's so and so. Or if you feel like, just kind of throwing things out there. And I was like, nope. And I did touch the doll and hug the doll and kind of try to, play along with this whole, like, if it is the spirit of a little, which creeps me out. I don't want my child stuck in a doll if they pass. So it's just kind of a weird
thing to tell people. I mean, I think that's horrible, because anybody that's lost a child, they don't want to think of their child being attached. Normal, nice, regular people pass away. They go through the light. They go on. They hide. They've evolved. They're not hanging around earthbound, but there are earthbound spirits. There's spirits that are earthbound, that are connected, that are wandering around, that were never human. And those are the really dangerous ones. And these spirits, but even the ones that were, I mean, look, long before I was dealing with any of this stuff, I mean, I was in massage therapy school, and I'll never forget this. I had a teacher who, she was teaching a Swedish massage. My first massage class, it was Swedish massage. And this lady was from Baton Rouge. She had Native American lineage, and, they called her the medicine woman. And one of the first things she said was, don't put your hands on certain people who, deal a lot with recreational drugs or alcohol or stuff like that, because they have negative entities going around them. And I thought, oh, okay, whatever. And it didn't hit me till much later, when I was really working heavy with the paranormal, that, now that makes sense. And then I've actually read books on spirit possession, actually written by, psychologists and psychiatrists, who now acknowledge that spirit possession is real. And we're not talking necessarily about demons. We're talking about earthbound spirits that stay attached to the earth plane, lots of times attached to these addictive behaviors. And what they want to continue to enjoy these things, and they can't enjoy it in spirit form. The only way they can do it is to get a host that's human. How do you get a host that's human? Entice them to something else.
It's deceiving, and it's
real stuff. This is why a lot of people, the Catholic Church, I don't want to get into religion, but the Catholic Church says, don't use Ouija boards, don't use pendulums, don't get involved in this stuff. Because what happens is, anytime you get involved in something like this, you're opening a portal. You're opening a portal, and if you're going to open a portal, you need to know what's on the other side, and you also need to close it. So when you start getting involved in this kind of stuff, where you start trying to communicate with something, you're calling it, it's going to come. But it's not going to present itself as what it really is until it's too late.
Yeah, and I agree with you. And Kalila, you've brought so much insight into a lot of investigations that we've done in this kind of manner of, like, number one, you're going to find what you're looking for. Number two, don't go messing with certain things. Like, just leave certain things alone. And then things aren't always what they seem. It's just one of those things where the dolls kind of fall into all of those categories.
But absolutely, yeah.
There's a reason why my spirit has always said, my gut instinct, just you're kind of clear of certain things. And that's one of the things just always didn't set right with me. And it's sad, because I do think that anybody that kind of goes into haunted items or dolls or any kind of big collection like that is going to be deceived at some point, because there's something attached to these items. What is it? I don't want it in my house.
No, you don't. You don't. Now, Alan's sitting here very quiet. Alan.
Oh, gosh.
He's dying to say something. I can tell. I know that look.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Go ahead, Alan.
Go ahead, Alan.
Throw it out there.
Well, I like how Kalila goes, and now it's time to hear from Captain Buzzkill.
Here's when we just like,
I mean, well, yeah, he's just sitting there dying to say something. It's like, okay, all right, we gotta let him say it, because he's got to let it go. You got just let it go, Alan. Just let it go.
At that particular show, at that particular exhibit with the dolls in the room and all that, the word psychotic leapt from mind far faster than psychic. The the presence of, and I'm not going to say the principals. These were additional people coming to the room.
Oh yeah. I've got the pictures to prove it.
Oh yeah. Wow. All I gotta say is what a great excuse to be a fruit basket. Oh my god.
Highly technical terms here that our skeptic uses.
Yeah.
He's the techie. Yeah.
I mean, I can go back to my aberrant psychology background and begin using big words, but really, I think convention going fruit basket covered it pretty well.
I want a t-shirt that says that. I've got to have a t-shirt. Convention going fruit basket.
Yes. Of one, all right. There is always going to be three kinds of people at any paranormal event. There's going to be the person that says, yes, it is. There's going to be the person that says maybe. And there's going to be the person that says, no, it ain't. It is fun watching these people justify their positions. Now, let's start with the fact that a doll is just plain out creepy. Let's start there. True case of working in a hospital. A woman was admitted probably around Thursday. Of her room Friday afternoon when I left the facility looked perfectly normal. Her family over the weekend brought in over 200 porcelain dolls to decorate her room.
Oh gosh.
Wow.
This would have been Tanya's idea of a complete Xanax moment. You couldn't have duct taped Tanya down long enough to keep her in that room. I walked in that room on Monday morning, and how could you sleep with 200 things all staring at you? Because these were very high-end porcelain dolls. These were not cheapies. These were very well made. They all had eyes. They were all, and it's just like, no. So a little chat was had with the family and explained to them that in the event of a medical emergency, all of these beautiful porcelain dolls were going to get turned into junk. And that the facility would replace them in kind at Walmart. It said 9-inch doll. I was going to go get plastic ones to replace the priceless porcelain. The family agreed with me, and it was time to take them all home.
There you go. That's what we do. Yeah.
I'm sure out there to this day, there is a family that truly dislikes me.
I'm going to say there's probably a lot of people that truly dislike you, but I'm just saying. I mean, I would say the same about myself. So I say that with love, Alan. There you go.
It's a good thing. It's a good thing I'm very popular on my cooking show, because on the paranormal shows, not so much. Let's go with A. It's a doll. B. Let's go with what I love to call the Scooby-Doo factor. In order to have a haunted doll, you must have a Scooby-Doo factor, aka there must be some lurid, terrible thing about this doll. Who died? The cat ate them. The hurricane killed everybody within 40 miles. I mean, there's always some terrible, horrible, lurid story. And I'm gonna make Tanya have a flashback of a certain Halloween exhibit we did one year together. And one of these scariest room in the house was all of these old, beat up, mangled dolls. I know it was Tanya's favorite room.
She doesn't remember it?
No, I remember.
She might from her memory.
Words were, oh, no. So,
walked right in and walked right out.
Yeah, she ripped right through. Yeah. Forget the fact we had been through the dismembering exhibit with chainsaws and body parts, and we've been through the swamp with giant spiders and things. Oh no, she's perfectly fine until we walk into the normal looking, kids looking bedroom with about 500 dolls that look like they'd been tortured.
Yeah, and they were talking. They were saying things, some of them.
Yes, one of the talking things. Yeah. So let's start with the fact that a doll has the appearance of a person.
Yeah.
Let's just start with the fact that it is recognizable as an avatar for a human being. And then we can very easily mentally project all kinds of things onto this. I am not a big proponent of what is already dead. It doesn't bother me. It doesn't scare me. The living, they worry me. Because you don't know what the living can, will, or could do.
Correct.
So just kind of throw it out there. So anytime there's investigations of, haunted couches, a haunted car, a haunted doll, it could be, there has to be a story.
Yeah.
No one has ever come over to you and said, hey, I found this and it's creepy. That doesn't work like that. They got to come over.
People have come up to me with stuff and said, I found that and it's creepy.
Yeah, but then they have a 10-minute story to tell you why it's creepy.
Well, yeah.
It's kind of like buying antiques. If there's no provenance to it, why are we scared of it? So you see,
haunted items is a real thing. It's a real phenomena. Now, I know you're going to snicker at that because you're the skeptic, but haunted items are real. It happens. Everything
I
in the
think
universe has energy.
You're haunted by things.
Well, that's true as well. But no, there are spirits out there who will attach to certain objects.
Yes, they're generally called nephews and nieces. Ex-girlfriends, ex-boyfriends, there's.
But look, what better, like if you are a mischievous spirit, like Kalila's saying that these are the roaches of the
spirit I will be when I'm left. Yes.
But if you're one of these crazy, these lower vibrating spirits that are attaching, what better thing to attach yourself to cause mischief is a humanoid looking thing, is an innocent little doll, or that kind of thing. So I could see that. I could see where I could see the appeal, like, haha, like my whole spirit life is to torment somebody, but I can't do this looking like this, but I can do this looking like this. And
exactly. Yeah. I interviewed a guy very recently. He's a local guy, and they have a paranormal society here, and these are people who are, at least my age. I mean, these are not kids just messing around. These people have been doing it, for 30 years. And they actually went on an investigation at some antique shop and saw with their eyes a shadowy thing walk across the room and disappear into a doll.
Oh, no.
Yeah, they saw this. They saw it.
Alan, oh my gosh, it just could see me and Alan and Kalila.
Can you imagine on an investigation going somewhere and you see something either come out of a doll or go into a doll? I mean, what would you do?
Well, one, I don't think I'd check the price of the doll. Just start there.
Well, these people did. I mean, they went back to go get the doll and somebody else had bought it. And
of course they did.
It's a huge phenomenon. I mean, have you looked on like eBay? Have you looked for haunted dolls for sale? It's huge.
It's huge. It's very huge. Yeah, it's extremely huge. But I mean,
if I wasn't an honest person, I'd have retired by now selling those things.
I'm like, just made me think.
Yes. I'm going, Tanya, we just need to know the right person that can put the,
I got
There's a lot of right people out there, but yeah, see, and you see, I don't want to fool with any of that because I don't want to conjure that up, and you will. And that's the
Well,
thing. If you look for something dark and creepy, it's going to find you. And if
Yep.
you're going to, I've had situations, especially with a tour company. I mean, come on, we do ghost tours. I've had people take, in the very beginning, I mean, we've been in business 26 years. So in the very beginning, the first tour guide, he couldn't make his route work with a particular story about a ghost of a guy who was a merchant seaman and who died, they had like one of those Murphy beds that fold up into the wall, and the bed supposedly opened and closed by itself. Well, he couldn't make it work with the route, so he transplanted the story to something that fit his route. And he transplanted it to a mask shop.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, haunted mask. And it didn't take long. I mean, night after night, somebody standing out there telling the story and saying it happened right there. Guess what started happening? When he would show up to tell the story, the lights would start flashing in the place.
Mm-hmm.
The owner of the place said, well, now the masks are spinning on their hooks. Things are moving around the shop. So what happened was, it's kind of like, if you say it enough, if you believe it enough, if you put that out because everything we say, think, project out into the universe is going out as a thought form onto that astral plane, and it's going to manifest. Well, what can they pick up on? They can pick up on energy, and our thought forms are energy. Our words are energy. All of this is vibration. So these spirits go, oh, okay, they want this to be this. I'll play. I'll play along. This happens a lot. This is why I tell people stay out of cemeteries. Happens all the time. And that's the creepy part. But that, to me, that's the scary part. Not the doll itself, but the fact that what has attached to the doll and presenting itself as something it's not. That's the scary part. So did you feel that this man's dolls were in fact haunted?
Yes, 100%. I have no doubt in my mind. I don't know all of them, but the ones that were being presented throughout the time of me knowing him and him in the cons and interacting, and several other people that were actually bringing theirs as well. Yeah, 100%. With what? I don't know. I mean, that's not for me to say, nor am I that kind of person. That's not my.
Sometimes you never find out. And my thoughts have always been, I don't want to find out. I don't want to know I don't want that thing to come. I don't want it coming after me.
No.
Now you're laughing, Alan, but from a spiritual perspective, I know what it's going to take to have to get rid of something like that.
Right. Well,
I'm well aware of what it's going to take and what something like that can do to somebody physically and mentally. So yeah, I consider it very dangerous. I won't do it.
Yeah,
I'm just thinking how much therapy cost for years.
Too much, Alan.
Yeah. It's
all very, very real, though.
Well, and there's too much. There was too much evidence that we not only we have found, but others had found, including himself, with owning these dolls, and too much stuff that we've heard and we've seen being presented as evidence to not think that there was not something going on. But after a certain point, there's damage that's being done, I believe, and that's kind of where you're right. There's a point where there's just stuff I don't do.
I mean, you're creating this symbiotic relationship with whatever this spirit is, and it's feeding into your thoughts and your fantasies, if you will. You want to believe that there's a child in there. It's going to feed into that, but at a certain point in time, it's going to make that jump. It's going to make that jump because what it wants to be is in the human form.
Not this form, baby.
Now, what's a horrible thought? What is a horrible, horrible thought is, what if it can make that jump and take over your body and leave you inside the doll?
Look, there's a whole show about that on like Netflix or something. So creepy. I don't even want to go there.
I mean, can you imagine? I mean, there's such things as walk-ins. I mean, what if it, you got to be careful playing with stuff like this.
No.
And it is scary. And I think that's why that whole thought of, and dolls, of course, people have always been afraid, and especially voodoo dolls, they always believe that there's spirit
There we go.
attached to the voodoo doll.
Let's cut to the chase and let's get to the ultimate dolls. Worry dolls and voodoo dolls. Because let's just get all the way, let's just get back down to the little corn husk that you tied in little knots to make it look like somebody.
Those are the worry dolls. Now, those are really nice because the worry dolls were, somebody had given my daughter worry dolls, and they were little tiny things, and they were in this little basket, and you tell the dolls your worries, and the dolls take them away from you. They kind of work like a dream maker thing does, the dream thing. Dream catcher, yeah. To where if you tell it to that object, and you're in a way putting that to that object yourself, so that you don't have to worry about it or you don't have to dream about it. Now, voodoo dolls are a little bit different, and I do have to say that voodoo dolls really have nothing to do with the religion of voodoo. There's really not dolls other than our American culture, and we expect to see dolls. But actually, the original voodoo dolls were actually European magic. They were called poppets.
Yes.
And the poppet, they would make them out of cloth. I mean, back in the day, they'd make these things out of cloth. And, because you got to realize back in the medieval times, back in, just a couple hundred years ago, people could not travel like we travel today. So if you wanted to, and lots of times these things were done for healing purposes, okay? If you wanted to do any kind of spiritual work or energetic work on an individual and you could not get to them, you could make a doll in this person's image and you attach something personal to the doll, a lock of hair, article of clothing, a photograph, something to where that doll represents that person. And you do work to the doll to transfer to the person.
Basically what you're saying is Bob has a bad knee, so we make a doll so that we can focus our attention on Bob's bad knee so Bob will feel better.
Right. Or they would use pins. You'd use a pin to pin something to the doll. It's made out of cloth. And here's where the pin comes in. Or they would also use pins. In a lot of cultures, I've heard them say that the pins represented stimulating the nervous system or the energy meridians, stimulating them and putting the pin to focus that energy where the pin goes. But lots of times, again, it was for healing purposes. A pin to the heart was probably to heal a broken heart. Get rid of grief, not necessarily give somebody a heart attack. Okay. Wow. A pin to the head or to get rid of negative thoughts, to get rid of a headache, not necessarily to give somebody an aneurysm. I mean, you cannot really kill and maim people by sticking pins in a doll, but you can have some sort of energetic transfer of energy by going through that motion and focusing that. Because again, you're putting it out on the astral plane as a thought form and as an intent, and eventually it's going to manifest on the physical plane somewhere, and you're hoping it manifests to that person. Now, of course, people I'm sure use them for negative reasons. And of course, Hollywood has turned it into something very negative because, horror is fun and, everybody likes horror fiction, but fiction is fiction. But without a doubt, I mean, again, that's where a lot of people get freaked out by the dolls. And yes, in some of the Afro-Caribbean traditions, dolls were very, very popular. And then you combine that idea with the idea that back then also it was very popular to give a kid a doll that looked like him, for no other purpose except, here's a doll that looks like you. Here's a little you doll, And it was like a keepsake.
Yeah.
See, Tanya, you could have little Tanya dolls.
I do have
little Tanya dolls.
I do have one. I have one that's like a homemade Cabbage Patch doll. It looks like me, and it's up in my attic in a box. Where it's gonna stay.
I used to wake up as a kid and I'd see that doll standing in the corner because she if you took her hand, she would walk. She walked with you.
Oh, I've seen those dolls.
This is from the early 1960s. She would walk. You'd hold her hands and she'd walk like that. And, I would wake up in the middle of the night and she would be there in the corner and it'd be like, ooh.
Yeah, like turn it around. Turn it around. My mom has dolls at her house in one of her rooms, and I'm just like, they're pretty. It's
Well,
an
I
interesting
think the
topic.
doll takes on special significance for people. I don't think we have to get paranormal for people to have emotions and a relationship to something that looks human.
Yeah, agreed.
And I think,
Well, yeah, especially if it looks like somebody that you recognize.
Yeah.
So I mean, it looks a lot. And, as a skeptic, you can never really look at anybody and tell them, no, you didn't have that experience. Because, yes, they did. But the interpretation of that experience, for instance, Kalila, you had no idea that, your dear Auntie Gertrude was from Yugoslavia, and they had the little cornhusk dolls and they put pins in them to help somebody heal.
Right.
Well, if you were going through her, effects after she had passed on, and here was a letter to Grandpa George, and here's Grandpa George with a big pin through his forehead, you might think Grandma had some, hard thoughts about Grandpa. Anything out of its environment can look very strange.
Absolutely.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, you and I have argued, all three of us have argued that for years.
Oh, yeah, yeah. But I think this is why, no matter what it is, a haunted doll is going to be scary to somebody, and a lot of somebody's.
I think any doll with a good story is going to be scary to anybody.
Oh, and there's a lot of them out there.
You just don't know. And you've seen enough movies. It's just creepy enough. You're going to have a question in your mind.
Yep. 100%.
All right. Well, there you go, folks. There you go. You decide.
Well,
is that doll haunted or is that doll not haunted? And do you want to take that chance on opening up that door with what might be inside that doll?
I don't think I'm not worried about what's inside the doll. I'm worried about what's inside that person's mind dealing with that doll.
Okay, fair enough. Fair enough. We'll give you that.
We have seen some pretty amazing performances, and not by the principals, but by the people looking at them.
Yep.
Right. Oh yeah, definitely. Definitely. It does have a psychological effect, without a doubt.
Mm-hmm. For sure.
All right, well, looks like we're running out of time, folks. Thank you, Tanya, for joining me and Alan on Scary Stories with Kalila. This has been so great to see you after so long. This has been a lot of fun, and thank you all for tuning in. We hope you will join us again next week for another episode of Scary Stories with Kalila. Pleasant dreams, everybody.
Bye, everyone.